Which one do we think does not belong, Maddie?
2.
Why?
Because the other ones, that they could form some sort of line, but
Okay.
2 just look scattered.
Okay, it's more scattered. Anyone else have that same thought? Okay. Jazzy. This one? Why? Say that last part more. It also looks scattered, but different than this one?
Yeah.
Okay. Was anyone else thinking that same reason for a 3? No? But it's okay. Original thoughts are great too. Anyone else think one other one doesn't belong?
4 is the only one going right to left, and like upwards.
So it's going in this motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else have that thought? Okay. Any other ones? Why would number 1, were you going to say something? Braylon?
1 is the only one that doesn't have a dot really close to the line.
When you say really close to the line, you're talking about like here or
Like, yeah, all the other ones have one on top of the line.
okay. Anyone else have that same problem? Any other reasons that one might not belong? Which one? Number 1. Okay, it's the only one that's going up positively. So we have some different words that we're going to be using later. Linear or a line, positive, scattered. We're going to have an actual word for that later. Anything else?
What is it going down?
Negative, okay. So we have a positive one, we have a negative one.
Number 2 is the only one who's not forming a graph or anything.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about what exactly that's called. And this one is also different because so these are kind of making line shapes. This one's not really making anything, it's scattered all over the place. But this is kind of doing this. And that's why that one's different. Anyone see that? Okay. Alright, one more. No. This one, okay. Olivia recorded goal and assist data for her field hockey team. Based on the data, she states that players who score more have fewer assists. Which graph matches Olivia's story and why? So take a second and think about that first. Right? Which graph do we think matches her story? Jonna. See, why? Because of the what correlation? Because of the negative correlation. Why do you think it's a negative correlation?
Because one number goes up, the other goes down.
Exactly. So as one number goes up, the other goes down. These numbers keep going up, but these numbers keep going down. That makes that negative correlation. B wouldn't work because it's the complete opposite. They're both going up together. These are going up and these are going up together. And then A wouldn't work because it's scattered. Who else was thinking C? Good. Monday, I said something about us using the data from Monday today, but we're actually doing that Friday. I misspoke. No? Yes? Mouse. I can't ever find my mouse because there's multiple screens. Disregard that one. First, the little half sheet is your tentative calendar, what we're doing in the unit. Most of the time, this doesn't change unless there's something comes up unexpectedly, you have to change some things around, whatever. Most of the time, this is whatever it says it's going to be. Notice that for our first unit, there's no like test or anything. That's intentional. Usually there is. This year is different because standards are changing, so this unit doesn't have a test. Unit 2 will have a test. These dates that are on here will also be in your Canvas calendar, which I will show you where those are and how to find those. If you ever lose this piece of paper, it's also on Canvas, and I'll show you where that is. On this board, we'll show you what we're doing every day. If you have a test or quiz coming up, I'll put like quiz next class, test next class. So make sure you're looking at that. Make sure you're looking at this, Canvas, all of those things so you know exactly when things are due. Up, Axel, raise your hand. So behind Axel, there's a bunch of things going on. The first boxes on the left are you guys, where you're looking. Where it says practice, anything that is due, upcoming, I'm going to put up there. there. I forgot to put dates, but Delta Math dates will be over there. Questions on any of that before we talk about some Canvas stuff? Okay, you guys can open up your iPads. Yes. I think it's in here. Right, so I'm just going to show you a few things, and then if you have other questions, so that's what, look at the Navigating Canvas page. If you want to go through other things, where is this, what does this do, things like that, we can do that. So right now, when you go into the class, you end up on the home page. Now, your home page looks a little different, but still same. So the most recent announcements will be here. So if you're not getting these, or maybe you turn notifications off, just check them, because it will always tell you. We'll go into one of the announcements later, what you need to do before the next class, just in case you missed it in class. On that same homepage later, if you want to go directly to a course unit, you can do so from right here. Some other great things to explore, but I'm just going to talk about a few. Class resources, that same page you were on Monday, it just links to that, so that it's a faster way to get there if you haven't already joined your class codes. Course calendars, that little orange sheet will be right in this module, so if you ever lose it, go right there and you can find whatever the course calendar is. You can always use this button. We'll talk about the others. Like highlighted office hours. So this currently is my office hours, so if you need me, if you need help, need to want to work on work here, do retake work, finish a test, whatever. As of right now, I don't plan on changing this, but this is what it is right now. In the morning, this should say 6:50 because that's what it was last year, but I gotta change that. So only on gray day mornings, if you have time, go eat breakfast, if you need to go eat breakfast. But if you have time and want to come in the morning, it'll be on gray days. And then once the activity bus starts, it'll be later. But right now, it's just Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday afternoons. Right now, it's until 3:30, but once activity buses start, it'll be until 4 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. All right, questions about the home page? I'm just going to go into the latest announcement just so you see what that looks like if you haven't. Here it is. So you will only see 2 things up there, but mine will show everything. So exactly what you need to do before the next class, whether it's homework, do this, Delta Math, whatever it is, it will be linked here. Okay. On the side links, some important things are the how to schedule office hours. So I'm going to click it, but I'm not going to play the video. Anytime you need to come see me before or after school, I want you to, for the first time, watch this video so you know how to do it. And then after you watch the video, do this in Canvas. Do this in the calendar, which I will show, but I don't know if it'll show like a student. So we'll try it. If you need to message me directly from Canvas, you can do that. If you don't have like Delta Math bookmark, you can click on it directly from here. If you're ever doing IXL, go in through Clever and then click IXL. There are other ones here like Desmos and other things you can explore, but those are like the main ones. Look at all the other side links, see if you have any questions about any of them before we move on. Right, and then we touched on modules, and then I'll go back to the calendar and whatnot. So go into your modules, and then we'll just kind of go through some of these, and then if there are anything else we want to see, we'll talk about that, and then we'll be done with Canvas really for today. So the most important modules I think you will need for this class are, you may have to scroll back up if you scroll down, absent. So obviously if you're absent or if I'm not here, follow those directions. That's a great place to start, and then it'll tell you where to go from there, what you need to be doing, things like that. I'll also usually, if I'm absent, post like a announcement to make sure you're reading that. How to study has really good tips. If you maybe didn't really study in middle school, I would definitely use this because you will need to study in high school for all of your tests. Now, most of these are math related, but you could also take some of those skills and use them and apply them to other classes. The office hours kind of has the same thing, so you can use that, but you don't need to. So all classes, so let's say you aren't here, if you want to go back and re-watch the lesson, if you're not here and want to watch the lesson, or maybe you missed something in class, I went too fast, whatever, and you want to go back and re-watch it, all of them will be in the recorded lessons. So all of these you can't see, but they might also change. So in that, you would just go into the, whatever it says, Unit 1. Nothing's there right now because this is the first time I'm recording this year. But you would go to your period, and this will have a link that'll take you directly to my YouTube page. And you can just click that and watch that, and then get notes that you missed if you're absent, stuff like that. So recorded lessons is a really good place to remember. Go back to that. Sometimes the board is really slow. Like throwing magic at it. Come on. Alright. The button on the home page, the course calendar, is going to take you directly right here. So I forgot to post this in there, which I will do later today. But usually it will be a PDF and it will be linked right there. But I will do that later today. Let me actually write that down because I'll forget. But there's also going to be another place to find it as well. Later we'll talk about flex days. This module is open all year, even though we don't really start doing a whole lot of SEL review until like later in the year. We do some throughout the year, but that's open if you ever want to just try and see what you know. Try it just to see if you can do it. It's always open. Retakes, once we start testing, will be an important module for how do we do retakes, what all do you need to do, stuff like that. We talked about this module. I also didn't post it here. Okay. Well, usually in your unit module, course calendar is at the beginning, but I forgot to do that. In a regular module, you can see what's in a unit module on your paper. There are a bunch of different things. You may not use all of them. You may want to go through every single page. That is completely up to you. Some of the really important things are like the notes pages will have blank notes, filled in notes. That's where the video of me just doing the notes, not our class video, but just me by myself doing some of the problems will be. A discussion from the notes, so make sure you're doing those. And if it has a Delta Math in the unit, it will show that, and then the date it's due. So you guys do have one that's due on Friday that wasn't open when you joined Delta Math, but it is now open. And usually it will also show quiz and test dates as well. That was a lot of information I just threw at you. Do we have any module questions, anything we want to see, Canvas questions in general? I have to go back to the Canvas calendar. All right. This doesn't work well in the Canvas app. You have to be like on a web browser, Safari, Edge, Chrome. So what I'm about to do, you may not be able to do, but you can definitely try it if you would like. So I'm going to go into the calendar. So not in here, but in the actual calendar, which will look different on yours. So yours, I think, is at the bottom. It says calendar. So you'll be able to see your course dates, and if you have Canvas on your phone at home, you can look and see that. So mine shows a lot. If you have all your classes with everything in there, you may want to unclick certain classes. That way you're only seeing certain things. So like right now I don't have as much. You can see you won't be able to see my office hours until you do this. I have to be in a specific mode. So a lot of times when I'm making Canvas stuff, I'll go into this to make sure it looks right on your end. There we go. Okay. So you'll see something that looks like this on a web browser, Find Appointment. And you will click My Class. If someone else is doing this, you may have to scroll, hit Submit, and then it'll take a second. Once it loads, you may have to scroll to find the date, and then you'll be able to see my office hours. And let's say you wanted to meet today, you would type in whatever we're meeting about and hit reserve. And then it'll be grayed out, and that's how you know you reserved it. You can also click on it, and then your name should appear. If you want to unreserve it, you just do the same thing. Right? And then that video, the how to schedule office hours, will tell you the exact same thing I just did when you want to do that whenever. Right? Questions about that? Cool. So that was really all I had to show you about Canvas. If you have any other Canvas questions, feel free to ask. You can close your iPads. You don't need them again right now, but I do need to pass something out. All right. A lot of what we talk about in this is going to be, some of it will be familiar, maybe some of the words won't be familiar, but you will have seen some of this before, except for maybe you may have talked about the data cycle last year. I don't know. Do those words sound familiar? Oh yeah, I'm so sorry. It's okay. So, do those words sound familiar? The data cycle, somewhat. I see some no's, some confused faces. It's okay. So, we're just going to talk about it. This will get brought up a lot this year and then continuing through the rest of your math career in high school. So, the data cycle, usually in a cycle, before I start. So a lot of times I say a lot of things that aren't up here. Feel free to jot any of that down if it helps you remember. But then there'll be a lot of things that I write down that I want you to write down. So make sure you write down anything that I write down or that I point out. Okay, so usually in a cycle, you start at one place, you go to the next, and then it continues. But the data cycle is not really like that. You can start at one place, but it doesn't have to be like right here. You can start right here and then continue. You can start right here and continue. So like the other day we took data. We collected and acquired data. We didn't really have any questions. You were just going around collecting data. And Friday, we're going to organize and represent that data, and then analyze data and communicate the results, and then formulate questions to explore with that, and kind of so on and so forth. So you can kind of jump in at any point in time, but the data cycle, we just have to remember these steps. Formulate questions, collect data, organize data, and then analyze it. There we go. Now we can see. So this next part's going to be just a lot of writing, so we can get vocab out the way. So a lot of the objectives, I'm trying to put, yes.
Can I grab a pencil?
Yes, go. A lot of the notes that I give you, I'm trying to put the learning target so you know what exactly we're learning. This one is like a sub-learning target from the objectives over there, but if you're ever not sure, you can look over there. But we're going to be talking about different types of data. So we have univariate data. That's what we did on Monday. It was one set of data, like just your age, just the number of siblings, just the number of people that live in your house. That's univariate data gathered around a single characteristic. Test scores, if I just collected the test scores of all the classes. Time spent on phone for all the students at Colgan. GPAs of all the students. That would just be univariate data, one piece of data. And then what we're going to be doing kind of today and Friday is talking about bivariate data, when there's two different variables being represented. So when we're comparing two things, age and height, hours studied and grade earned, whatever two things you want to compare when we talk about our data on Friday. We mentioned these 4 steps on the previous slide, but we have to know these and get them through again and again. The 4 steps, in whatever order: formulate questions, collect and acquire data, organize and represent data, analyze data and communicate results. Can you see from there? Yeah. Yes, okay. Anyone still need this top part? Okay. If I scroll down and you need me to go back, just let me know. Okay, so in step 1, the formulating questions and to be explored with the data. So these are questions that should explore the relationships between two characteristics or variables. And then we look for trends, which we'll talk about in a moment, in this relationship. You might hear association instead of relationship. They are meaning the same thing. How are they associated? How are they related to each other? What is their relationship? Anyone still need this top part? Okay. In step 2, where we collect or acquire data, there are different ways to do this. So we can collect data by doing research or looking at someone's research, doing surveys or looking at someone's surveys. And then there are more on the back. We can collect data through observation, looking at just whatever's happening without really like saying anything, just watching. By actually doing experiments, so a lot of scientists are collecting data. By taking polls, maybe in your community, of the school, in general, or finding polls. Questionnaire is kind of the same thing as polls, but doing questionnaires. Or acquiring data from like a trusted source. So maybe not Wikipedia, but something that has been proven, we went through this, it's trusted, okay. And then after we collect or acquire that data, we're going to organize and represent it. So usually we show data points, usually on a scatter plot. So you may have done a lot of bar graphs, pie charts, histograms, stuff like that previously. We're trying to kind of get away from those and focus more on the scatter plots. And then we're looking for, when we're representing, is there a pattern in the data? We may see, or later we're going to find lines or curves of best fit that can be drawn to show a trend in the data. We talked about positive and negative lines, correlations earlier in the warm-up, and that's kind of where those stem from. And then as we're organizing and representing the data, we can make predictions based on this data. Because I know this is going to be a positive relationship, what could happen at this point in time? Or because I know this is going to be a negative relationship, what could happen at this point in time in the data? And then at step 4, analyzing the data and communicating the results. That's where we really start to look at the questions we asked and answer, does the data answer the question that we originally had? If it does, okay, cool, let's go forward with that. If it doesn't, okay, why? Is there a correlation? Is there a relationship between the two things that we're looking at, that we're comparing in the data? Is this a positive relationship? Is this a negative relationship? Is there no relationship? So those relationships are really correlations. Is it a positive correlation, negative correlation, or no correlation, no relationship? So that one that we saw that was scattered, that would have had no relationship or no correlation. But not just is it positive, negative, or does it not have a relationship at all, but does it make a line? Is it linear? Does it not make a line? It's not linear. Is it quadratic, which we'll talk about that word more later, but that really just means a U-shaped parabola. But again, we'll talk more about that later. So as we're analyzing and we're figuring out all of these things, then we're communicating whatever this relationship is. I was going to give you an example, but I'll hold off on that until we actually do one of the scatter plots. But communicating using those words, is it positive, negative, does it not have a relationship, is it linear, nonlinear, quadratic, and then using that to make final predictions on the data. I think that's the last thing. Right, shake out your hands. I know that was a lot of writing. I actually last year had tendinitis in my wrist because I wrote way too much one day. So sometimes I'll just stop and I'll just shake out my wrists and I'll do this, or you'll see me do some of my arm. I literally had to go to physical therapy. So if you see that, that's why. So now I'm just like, shake out your wrists. Okay. Anyone still need this page? Yes, okay. And then one last page of just like vocab, and then we'll actually do some practice. Okay. So as we start to organize and represent our data, we also need to know how scatterplot works, especially when we start to make our own scatterplots. So all of our scatterplots need a title. This is something like you would see if you read the newspaper or news articles online. It needs some sort of title that tells you what exactly is going on. And then both of the axes must have a label. They shouldn't be the same label because you're comparing two different sets of data, but it should tell you exactly what this represents. And then when we start to create our own data and scatterplots, it's a little small, but I am going to read it out loud. So the spacing on an axis must be in equal increments. However, the spacing on the x-axis does not have to be the same on the y-axis. So here on the x-axis, on the bottom, visually, this is counting by 4s. I can see 0, 4, 8, 12. But if I were to count the lines in between, I can see it's actually counting by 2s, which is fine. And then on my y-axis, the vertical line, these are visually counting by 40. Those are the numbers I see. And in between, that would be halfway through, so it's counting by 20s. So make sure you know exactly what it's counting by. That way when you start to create your own scatterplots or when you're finding or doing data on scatterplots, you know where exactly to plot points and stuff like that. When you're finished, you can turn to the next page. And then we're actually going to do stuff with scatterplots. Can you see that boy? When there's a small amount of vocab, I'll just write in what the words are, but when there's a lot, I just have it up here. That way it's just easier for you to copy down. Okay, so we're going to do number 1 together, then you guys are going to do number 2. That's kind of how a lot of class works. I do 1, you do 1, and then we test out or repeat together. So we have some data. We need to construct a scatterplot by carefully plotting the points, describe the relationship, and identify any gaps, clusters, outliers. We will talk about that part in a moment. Okay. You may have to. Sometimes it's janky. You have to take your pencil out, put it back in a couple times. Alright. So, hours on a phone, we you see that it's represented on our x-axis. Test grade, you see that's represented on our y-axis. Our hours on our phone are counting visually by 2s, which means every in-between is counting by 1. And then our test score is counting by 20, so every in-between is counting by, you can say this out loud, 10. So keep that in mind when we go to do this. So we're going to start on the x-axis and go up to the y-axis. So hours on the phone is going to start at 5 in the middle between 4 and 6. Test grade is going to go up to 50 in the middle between 40 and 60. So something like that. We're just going to plot a point there. We're going to do that for all of these points. So if you want to work ahead, go for it. 95 is going to be in between. So I know 90, sorry, let's start over. 2 is right here. 90 would be in between 80 and 100. 95 is going to be like in between that. Then we get these weird numbers like 82. So again, 3, 80 is right here. I know this is 90. This would be like 85, so somewhere in between that. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to look like it should be at 82. 44 would be the same thing. So over to 7, up to 40. Kind of a little under the halfway mark. Try to make it look like that. It's okay if it doesn't. 2 and 70 is nice, right on the line. I have an air freshener that goes off every 36 minutes, just in case you were wondering. 5 and 50. Oh, that was plotted twice. So you could just make another point there. You don't have to. It's already plotted, so you don't really have to do it again. 4 and 66. So that would be a little bit more than half. 1 and 86. Again, a little bit more than half. That was like at half. It's okay. 7 and 90. And 8 and 25. So like half. So we want to try and be as accurate as possible, but maybe you don't have a steady hand and you move it over a little bit, or as long as it, for like the 82, as long as it doesn't look like it's way up here, because that doesn't look right, as long as it's somewhere down here, it's fine. Okay. And then if we had to describe this, what would you say about this? Okay.
That even though in most cases, like it seems like the higher the number of hours on the phone is below the test grade, there are like some exceptions to that.
Okay. Like this one out here. Okay. Anyone else see anything that they want to say about how they see this? Or see something different? Okay. So I would, as I'm describing this, I want it to be as descriptive as possible. So first talk about the relationship between these two. What's happening with the number of hours? What's happening with the test score? The number of hours is doing what? Going up, increasing, great words. And then the test scores are going, they're decreasing or going down. So we write that. My handwriting is not the best, so if you can't read it, just let me know. I'll try to fix it. So put that number of hours increasing, test scores decreasing, or going up, going down. And if, yes, I don't have the hall pass, just go. If someone stops you, tell them I sent you. If one is going up and the other is going down, what type of relationship is that? Negative. Good. So this would be a negative correlation or relationship. And then Maddie pointed out that most of the time this proves to be true. The more hours spent on the phone, the lower the test score is. But then we have this one out here that spent a good amount of time on the phone but still scored pretty high. That would be called an outlier. That's something that is not normal for the data. So if you see something like that, the word for that is outlier. If you see like a bunch of points scattered really close together, that would be a cluster. And gaps really only work if there's like a lot here, and then there's a noticeable gap, and then a lot here. So like these are just evenly kind of spaced. There's no real gap. Questions on how we made the scatter plot or how we described it? Do the second one. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about it. So your scatter plot should look something like that. And then yours doesn't have to be worded exactly like this. But as the number of fat in grams increases, the number of calories increases as well. So you need something that describes what the actual characteristics are doing, whether it's increasing, decreasing. And then it doesn't say this, but because they're both increasing, that would be what type of relationship? Positive. Good. There are two clusters, like these are kind of closer together and these are close together, so those would be different clusters. I could also say there's a significant gap here. There's clearly a gap here. Okay, we're going to do one more of these and then go on to the very last thing. Yeah, so we'll just do number 1. So I'm going to go ahead and start plotting those points. You also go ahead and start plotting those points. So we have age in years, counting by 20, 10 in between. Miles walked is counting by 2, so 1 in between. So at age 20, 9, 64, 35 would be somewhere like right here in between. So 30 is here, 35 would be in the middle. 40 and 7, 70 and 1.5. So 1 and 1.5 would be like right here. 55 and 4. 25 and 7.5. So 1's going to be like in the middle of your grid lines completely. 50 and 5. And 30 and 6. And 80 and 1. So we collected some data. We represented it on the scatter plot. Now we're going to analyze it using the questions. So if we were to describe the association between the two variables, so this is what is happening to one variable, what is happening to the other. So what's happening in age, what is happening with miles walked.
As the age increases, the miles walked decreases.
Okay. Miss list it as 8 in years, just because that's the word in here. And because we were able to analyze that data, now we can formulate questions and use it to predict using that data. Now, based on the scatter plot, predict the number of miles a 13-year-old student would walk. So I want you to see if you can figure that out. If I were to find a 13-year-old, about how many miles would they walk? What do you think? Go, John.
9.77.
How'd you get that specific number?
Well, it seemed like a little less than 8, not 0.5.
Okay.
Not 0.75.
Okay, so you're saying maybe like, this is 10, so right here, like, a little higher, so like right here.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else have other predictions? Go ahead. No. Okay. Right here. Okay. I feel like either of those would be really good predictions because based on the way this data looks, it would be fine. Because they're using decimals, 9.7, probably not the extra 7, but 9.8 if you want to round it, would be fine. The 10, I think, would be fine. What number would not make sense for a 13-year-old? Go ahead now.
Probably anything lower than the 20-year-olds.
Okay, so like anything here, that would be some outlier. Maybe something happened to them tragically. Maybe that's why. Or something. That would be some outlier. Right? So we can say, I'll put both answers. I'll round it, 9.8. Or 10 miles. Anytime we answer a question that's talking about something specific, some characteristic, we need to label. We can't just put 9.8, we can't just put 10 what miles. Make sure we know what we're talking about. Alright, what about an 85-year-old man? Maddie?
Probably half of that.
Okay, so like right here. They're not getting very far. They're not very active. Their bones are fragile. They got old. And they're not walking very far. So yeah, that makes sense. What's a number that wouldn't make sense here?
Well, my 84-year-old grandpa, he walks like 3 miles.
So if they're really fit, if they stayed fit, that would be an outlier. But that would be a number that technically wouldn't make sense. But yes. Right. I'm going to, for sake of time, skip this really quickly, go into this. Right, and we just want to describe these as positive, negative, maybe no correlation, there isn't one. Is it linear? Is it nonlinear? Does it not make a line? And then I'm also going to add in one more vocab word that wasn't on the previous one. So we won't do all of these, we'll just do a few. So what about one? What words, how would you describe that?
Linear negative correlation.
Okay, so linear negative correlation, or negative linear correlation. Yeah, let's word it like that. Negative linear correlation. And then two more vocab words are strong and weak. If the points are like really close together, they basically make a line. Strong. And later we will redefine those words as well. But if they're kind of like, they're not super scattered, but they're scattered enough that I can tell it's kind of making a line, but it's not like a exact straight line, it would be weak. So I can say a weak negative linear correlation. What about number 2? Positive. It's strong. Is it making a line? Is it not making a line? And there's clusters. Yeah, so all of the things. So it's a strong positive linear correlation and there's a cluster. Part of the board is like not working, which is why I'm scrolling. There we go. And then plus, I would say probably is this right here. This one didn't really have any gaps, clusters, or outliers. It's like evenly spaced, no outliers, no row clusters. What about 3? How would you describe that one? No. So yeah, later we're actually going to talk about can we really put the negative, positive to it, because if it's nonlinear, those really have different things. Go ahead.
Is it a quadratic thing?
It's not quadratic. It is something else that we also haven't talked about yet, but it's actually exponential. We'll talk about that later because it's making this shape. But it is nonlinear. And for now, we're just going to leave it as it's nonlinear. Right. I'm going to leave the other 3. I want to do at least one more before I let you do practice. Okay. And I want to try number 8 on the back. So this time, we already have the data. It's been collected for us. We're just going to analyze and predict. So what information is shown on the X and Y axis? Test scores and hours on phone. So that part we can easily find just by the titles or the labels on the axes. So on the x-axis, we have hours on the phone. On the y-axis, we have test scores. So similar to one of the ones we already did, but it has more data. How many students were surveyed? How could we find that number? Yes. So do that really quickly. Tell me how many points there are. 16. And if we're labeling 16 what? Students. Right? And then let's describe the relationship. What's happening? Okay, it's negative. There's an outlier. Describe it with these words.
As the test score increases, the hours on phone decrease.
Is that the order of which is going? Yeah. So as the number of hours on the phone increase, the test score goes down. So kind of write both things. I'm just going to shorthand this because I don't have a whole lot of space up here. You can fully write it, you can shorthand it, either way. As the number of hours go up or increase, the test scores go down or decrease. It's a negative linear correlation. The outlier is actually answering part D. So identify the outlier. We want to say what it is. So this would be that outlier. It's kind of out there by itself. At, what does that point at? How many hours? 9 hours. And what is their test score? 90. That's not his score. There we go. And how could it have ended up on the scatter plot? Why are they an outlier? What could have happened for them to still be on their phone this amount of time and get this score. Okay.
Maybe they're on this study.
Okay. Okay. So maybe not on TikTok or Facebook or anything like that. They were actually on their phone studying, and maybe that's why they got such a good grade. Any other reasons?
Maybe they're just really smart.
Okay. Possible. Yes, Matthew?
They probably cheated.
Or they cheated. All of those are great answers, okay? So when we think about outliers like that, we have to think about, okay, what could have really happened to make this outlier? All right. So for the remaining, remember we end at 10:06. You could be working on one of two things. I'm giving you options. You have a Delta Math that's due on Friday. You could get it done right now, and then you don't have homework. It will be counted as a formative, and you can redo it as many times as you need to get to the 100. So you could do that now. If you haven't joined Delta Math, you would need to do that first. Or you can keep working in your notes packet. So you have those options. I am going to unlock your iPads. You can work together on both the paper and the Delta Math. You can move around if you so choose. We're just not grabbing phones yet. If you would like a calculator, you shouldn't need one, but if you want a calculator, you can grab one.
Is the notepad free?
No. Thank you all for participating.